The 8th of November, 2022. The release date of Sonic Frontiers, and for the first time in quite a while for a 3D Sonic game, it was generally well received by Sonic fans. Mostly, anyway. Sonic fans can be quite fickle. I know that, because I am a Sonic fan. It definitely had its flaws, but I think a lot of people thought it was a good base for a new style of Sonic game going forward, with the open zone gameplay looking to be the long-term future for the Blue Hedgehog. And shortly after the game's release, a lot of people were already looking to possible future games until on the 30th of November, Sonic fans were graced with this image. Over the coming year, we were promised 3 updates, and if you can't guess already, this video is focusing mostly on the last one, because for the first time in... let's see here... 2006? Really? For the first time in 17 years, Tails, Knuckles, and Amy will be playable in a 3D Sonic game. Not only that, we will be getting a new story. This was interesting, as a lot of people found the original ending to be quite anticlimactic, me included. First though, I thought I'd let all of you know what I think of the original Frontiers quickly. Overall, I really like the game. I enjoy the story and the open world stuff despite there being a lot of jank. Cyberspace though? No. I really dislike the reuse of both level aesthetics and level design. Granted, I think the adventure levels work a lot better with the Frontiers controls than the boost levels, which honestly were not fun at all for me originally. I find it quite frustrating as well, since the completely original cyberspace levels are comfortably the best levels in this game in my opinion. However, the updates to the control and momentum massively improved cyberspace for me, along with the addition of the spin dash, which is whoa! Yeah, it's pretty good in this game. Also, it goes without saying that the boss fights are absolutely amazing, despite me thinking the combat can be a bit shallow. With my feelings about the game pretty clear at this point, let's move on to the third update, the Final Horizon. Story-wise, this update takes place directly after the events of Rhea Island of the main game, and involves Sonic learning to hone his cyber corruption to a power that he can channel, whilst Tails, Knuckles, and Amy all search for the Chaos Emeralds. Oh, Eggman and Sage are here as well. They don't really do much until the end, but I do like this interaction.
And save the world, too, right?
It is his to conquer, so yes.
And with that setup, we take control of Amy. Oh my god, she can triple jump. Oh, she can glide. Oh, she uses tarot cards. Would I prefer her to use a hammer a bit more? Yeah, sure, but I don't care. She uses the same animation of a hammer jump from Adventure 1 and I love it. You know what? Let's take on a Guardian. Oh, okay, so maybe they saw some of the complaints that Frontiers was a bit easy, which in all fairness, it is. But what in the Dark Souls is this? Okay, that's an exaggeration, but it's pretty obvious that these enemies were not meant to be fought with anyone other than Sonic. And if you want to challenge me on that, the game literally says it in an optional conversation with Sage. I'll talk more about Guardians later when I get to Sonic sections. Let's talk about Knuckles next. Oh boy. Good stuff first. It's nice to see Knuckles. Yeah, that's about it. In all seriousness, seeing his moves from 06 was pretty cool, and this drill attack thing, also pretty cool, however you never really get a chance to use it. Okay, onto the elephant in the room here. What did they do to his glide? I don't mind the wind-up animation, but it's so heavy. It's genuinely a struggle to make turns. Thankfully, you don't really need to turn for a lot of these challenges, but it still doesn't feel great to control. Also, his climbing can be really janky, but I put that down to general Frontiers jank more than anything else. This infinite glide you can unlock though, this is great. Don't get me wrong, it absolutely breaks the game, but it is pretty fun. You want to talk about breaking the game though? Let's talk about Tails. I'd just like to say that Tails is one of my favourite characters, so I absolutely love seeing him playable again. I mean, just look at him. His tail spin when he runs, he can fly and it's awesome. He runs like he's in Sonic 06, why are you doing that? He also has an infinite number of wrenches he can throw for some reason. I would have preferred him to use his tails to attack like an SA1, but who cares, he can use the tornado too. This is absolutely broken. If you give yourself infinite boost before using it, you can fly wherever you want, which renders most of Tails' challenges useless because you can just fly to the end. Oh my god, you can use the big you laser from SA2, this game is awesome. Okay, so what are you actually doing with the new characters here, other than looking for the emeralds like I said earlier? The actual gameplay consists of many platforming challenges specially designed for certain characters. At the end of them, you'll find a different type of Coco. One gives skill pieces which allow you to unlock skills like in the regular game, one fills in some of the map, and another is tied to the story progression. These are different for each character, with Amy talking with Elder Cocos, Knuckles beating up these Impact Coco, and Tails doing some reprogramming of these devices. This ultimately allows the three to collect Chaos Emeralds, as they were hidden by the Coco to keep them away from the end. Overall, I thoroughly enjoyed the platforming and level design for Amy, Knuckles, and Tails. I think it does a really good job utilising the characters' movesets to produce some engaging level design. Yeah, it's still all floating platforms, which is disappointing, but I think this is really encouraging stuff for future games. The next step is just incorporating this type of level design more naturally into the environment. I also really liked how some of the challenges were a bit more of a puzzle, with you needing to use your unlocked skills in different ways to progress through it. Overall, really good stuff. After collecting the first 3 emeralds, you take control of Sonic, where he's trying to control his cyber corruption. To do that, he needs access to these towers, which lead him to trials to complete. To unlock these towers, you need to collect Lookout Coco. You can either find them around the island, or you can play cyberspace levels to get them, and wow, what a glow up cyberspace has had since the start of this game. I honestly could not believe what I was playing when I first jumped into these levels. They're all remixed versions of existing cyberspace levels from the main game, but they added so much that they may as well be completely different stages, and I can honestly say that the level design is great. The sheer number of different routes you can take is honestly overwhelming at points. Some levels even have alternate goals, and one of the challenges is to find it for stages that have them. Other challenges include raising a tailed hologram to the finish, saving animals, and collecting number rings and silver moon rings, which give me bad flashbacks of forces, so I'm gonna move on. Quite a few of the stages have gimmicks like rocket boosting, which is fine, but I could have done without the stage that makes you go through the gears as you boost. I think it makes Sonic's control a bit more awkward. However, when you're given stages like this that are just so fun to go through with things like the spin dash, I can excuse some of the more experimental things done here. Cyberspace is genuinely a highlight in this update, which is such a 180 from the original game. However, to access cyberspace levels, you need to find gears, just like the main game, and whilst yes, you can find them just lying around, you can also get them by defeating Guardians. Yes, Guardians have received quite a buff in this update. The difficulty spike from the main game to this is honestly ludicrous and actually pretty funny in some cases. I mean, look at how quickly this thing moves. However, whilst this is obviously much harder than the main game, it's definitely not impossible, and in some cases I kind of like it. For instance, I enjoy fighting Caterpillar because I think the fast pace encourages you to keep moving, dodging, and parrying attacks in a way that I think is pretty thrilling. This is certainly not the case for most of the Guardians though, as it seems Sonic Team just turn the movement and attack speed up to max and wish the players luck. Fighting these things as Sonic isn't awful because he's by far the most competent at combat, but every other character struggles. It's certainly possible with the other characters, but they just don't have the damage output that Sonic has, even at max level, which is a bit disappointing, especially with someone like Knuckles, who's supposed to be the more combat-oriented one. Personally, I can enjoy fighting Guardians as Sonic, but that's mostly because I'm a sicko who likes difficult games. Since we're on the topic of difficulty, let's talk about the towers. Towers consist of large vertical platforming sections that lead to the top where you agree to with a trial to complete. It's just like Rio Island from the main game, and if you didn't like those towers, good luck. Yeah, these sections are by far the most difficult platforming you're going to do in this game, and this wouldn't be so bad if there were checkpoints. There aren't any checkpoints. This is obviously ridiculous, but I can't lie, I really enjoy these towers. I've played this game a lot, so I understand how Sonic controls pretty well at this point, and controlling him through these sections was really fun. Yet again though, that's my experience, not yours or anyone else's. I can definitely acknowledge that these sections are difficult, however for me, they weren't awful other than the fourth one. Those wind turbines can go die in a ditch. Most of the time when I fell, I just fell to a previous section rather than the very beginning, which was still annoying, but I could handle it. The fact there are no checkpoints in these sections though is still a ridiculous decision, and is a design choice that punishes the player too much for mistakes that are bound to happen with this sort of level design and jank. I personally enjoyed the challenge, but I can see why a lot of people wouldn't. When you get to the top of these towers, you're met with one of the spirits of the warriors that piloted the Titans. These spirits present a trial to Sonic to test him. The first trial consists of defeating these enemies in the time limit with Sonic stats locked at level 1. This can be a bit overwhelming since these things move very fast, but Sonic's parry can really carry you through this, and Sonic's special attacks are more than enough to get the job done. The second trial limits Sonic to only the side loop against these enemies. This may seem pretty difficult at first, but it's more a case of picking the right strategy than anything else. I found success parrying the projectile and attacking was arced away before parrying again. It's just a case of constantly repeating this until the enemy died. The next two trials are really easy. They're just versions of Ninja and this enemy, which I don't know the name of. They attack and move much faster, but their health hasn't changed much, and you have all your abilities, so as long as you can parry well, they should go down with no problem. After those trials, you take control of the other 3 characters to gather another 3 Chaos Emeralds where you do the exact same things you did the first go around. Once the emeralds are collected, Sonic has one more tower to ascend. At the top of the tower, you're met with the Master King Coco, who offers to help Sonic hone his cyber corruption into a power by completing his trial. His trial is very simple. Beat Giganto, Wyvern, and Knight at level 1 and perfect parry. Wait a minute, that doesn't sound very simple. First off, what's perfect parry? Well, it's a much shorter version of a regular parry, so you have to time it. That sounds reasonable, right? It isn't. For clarification, I played this whole update on hard difficulty, and they aren't messing around when they call it perfect, because you have very little wiggle room for this thing. You either parry exactly when the attack happens, or you get hit. Oh, and you only get 400 rings for all 3 fights. I can give the benefit of the doubt to Sonic Team for the difficult platforming and such at this point, but I can't for this. This is just painful. These fights were not made with this time parry in mind, and whilst it's fine for projectiles since you can see them coming, it's a lot harder to parry Titan attacks. You can kind of get by with Giganto and Knight since you can deal damage pretty well with minimal parrying. Wyvern though? You will fail. The main issue with this trial is that the Telfer attacks is not noticeable enough to justify this tight of a timing for the parry, and it's at its worst for Wyvern. I've gone to a point where I can parry these attacks pretty reliably, but the tail attack and the laser attack are so hard to read it is genuinely unfair. Also, whilst the missiles are easy to parry when you see them coming, they can come out of nowhere sometimes to hit you. Wyvern also sometimes lets off another set of missiles straight after you parry a missile, so you can get blindsided by one as you're getting ready to parry one of Wyvern's attacks. Knight is also a bit of a pain because you'll probably spend so long trying to beat Wyvern that you have no idea what the timing of his attacks are. This trial on hard difficulty is probably the hardest thing I've played in a Sonic game. Eggman lands hard, right? But at least your checkpoints and the amount of extra lives they give you along the way means you will eventually beat it. This genuinely feels impossible at points, and it's really disheartening when you swear you've timed it right but get hit and waste time and oh for God's sake! A little tip I can give for all the fights is quick side loop the Titans when you can, since your attacks deal more damage when they're trapped. What I'm about to say may sound insane, and that's because it is. Despite the fact that this trial is obviously bull, I quite enjoy it. There's just something about parrying attacks in this trial that is just so satisfying to me. Yeah, again, I'm a weirdo. I'm also at a point where I can reliably beat this trial, so going back to it is nowhere near as frustrating to me. Objectively though, considering that this is mandatory to beat this update, this is easily the worst part of it. And it'll take a while to clear as well, because there's no way you're doing it on your first few attempts. If you want to play this update, just play this trial on easy, as I've heard the parry timing is much more generous. Don't bother playing it on hard, it probably won't be fun for you. The only thing left after that trial though, is the final boss. Eggman gives Sonic the final Chaos Emerald and goes Super to take it on. Well, first you've got Supreme to take care of, which is the exact same fight as the main game. Since I was at max level, I could basically sneeze at the boss and it'll die, so it's no problem. That's not the main attraction here, as directly after Supreme, the end itself comes down to take control of Supreme. This is the real final boss. Initially, you can't do anything, your parry is useless against these projectiles and they even lower your max ring count. One Cyber Corruption transformation later, and this is where the boss really begins. With this new power, you can parry the projectiles, but you have the perfect parry from the Nightmare trial. This may seem awful, but it's obvious that this boss was made with it in mind, so it's perfectly reasonable. The boss will regenerate health whenever the cord from the end is connected to the Titan, so you have to sever that cord first to reliably deal damage. However, this only really serves as the first phase of the boss, since you can't defeat it by just attacking it. The second phase only starts when you side-loop the Titan's gun and give it to Eggman and... Okay, this makes up for Master Stupid's trial. This is awesome. The first phase was pretty cool already with an orchestral version of I'm Here, but this second phase with Kellen Quinn doing a version of it is so unbelievably hype. And when Sonic's doing things like this, it just makes this boss so fun to play, and Sonic with this new power is presented as ridiculously powerful. I mean, he swats away projectiles as a parry and can crush the boss at a snap of his fingers. How can I not like this? There's an added mechanic in this second phase where your friends are holding up a shield and there are points where the Titan attempts to break it. It's not exactly clear that's what it's doing, but all you need to do to avoid it is to dodge to the back and parry. Other than that, this is still a Titan boss fight, so even though it's a little more involved, it's still pretty simple to beat. Honestly, the hardest part about it is just trying to figure out how to progress through the boss in the first place. It's not exactly obvious that you need to sever the cord and take the gun for yourself. You can unlock hints for the boss by completing everything on the island, like uncovering all the map, maxing out all the characters, and beating all the Guardians, which is way more difficult than the final boss, but your only reward for doing it is a hint to beating the final boss, which doesn't make any sense. After draining the End's health, Sonic kicks the thing up into the air and proceeds to fire himself out the gun after going all out with his Cyber Corruption. Yeah, again, this is awesome. This takes out both the Titan and the End itself, and leaves Sonic in quite a state. It's alright though, he's the main character. He plummets back to the ground and is perfectly fine somehow. A change from the original ending is that Sage is alive in this version, which is nice. Also, it leads to a vocal version of I'm With You that plays over the credits, which is also nice because I really like this song. Sonic Team set out to fix the rather anticlimactic ending of the main game, and in my opinion, they absolutely smashed it out of the park with this. This update definitely has some issues, but when it hits hard, and I think that's probably a perfect encapsulation of Sonic Frontiers as a whole. My main issue with the update is just how much of a difficulty jump it is from the main game. Despite me liking the added challenge, I can acknowledge that it isn't great that the game goes from asking very little of you in the main game to asking everything of you in the update, and some things could have been better explained, like the final boss. However, I've seen a lot of promise in this update, mostly from the level design seen in both the island challenges and cyberspace. Also, none of the level design in this update is in 2D, which is great. If we see more of this sort of stuff in the future with some better incorporation into the environment, I think we can see a Sonic game of the future which is a great game as a whole instead of being great in bursts with noticeable flaws elsewhere. With that being said, despite its flaws, Frontiers is probably up there with some of my favourite Sonic games, because whilst I think other games are better overall products, very few Sonic games reach the heights that this game did for me at points. The supersonic fights, the spin dash, and the level design in this update are genuinely great, and the fun I had with them outweighs my gripes with the game. As a game that marks a new era of Sonic, we could have done a lot worse than Frontiers, but it's important that Sonic Team listens to the feedback and uses it to create an even better game in the future. And considering how willing Morio Kishimoto was to listen to fans' feedback and apply it with updates, I'm optimistic for the future of Sonic. Now let's hope that statement doesn't age terribly by the time the next 3D Sonic game comes out. If you want to listen to me talk more about Sonic, here's a video where I played every single Super Sonic boss fight, including Frontiers, so if you want to see how I think those fights match up to the previous ones, head on over. See ya.